Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Melanie Moore Richardson, and I'm happy to invite you to our celebration of National Poetry Month today. As we wait for folks to join us, if you want to type in the chat where you're tuning in from, we'd love to hear. We have a lot of awesome readers who are excited to share their thoughts and stories with us today, and we'll get started in just a few seconds. Well, thank you again so much for being here this afternoon. When North Carolina Humanities was approached by North Carolina Literary Review to partner on a poetry program this year, we agreed that having an event on Poem in Your Pocket Day would be something really special. If you did not know, Poem in Your Pocket Day is presented by the Academy of American Poets. Every April during National Poetry Month, people celebrate Poem in Your Pocket Day by selecting a poem, carrying it with them, and sharing it with others throughout the day at schools, bookstores, libraries, parks, workplaces, anywhere, including Zoom. And again, we're happy to have you on Zoom with us this afternoon. Before I get started, I want to go over just with some quick Zoom housekeeping rules this afternoon, just so we can have an engaging and meaningful conversation today. So I do want to mention as well that any views, findings, or opinions expressed today aren't necessarily those of NC Humanities. Zoom housekeeping rules today. So today's program is being recorded, and you can watch it later and share it with your friends on our YouTube channel at NC Humanities. We'd love to hear from you during today's event, so if you want to share your admiration for one of our readers or talk with us, you can do so in the chat. Also ask questions of our poets. Closed captioning is also available by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And we encourage you to share your experiences with us on social media at NC Humanities and with North Carolina Literary Review on all of our platforms. So again, thank you for being here. And at this time, I want to pass the virtual microphone over to North Carolina Humanities Executive Director, Sherry Paula Watkins, to say a few words. Sherry Paula?
Thank you, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sherry Paula Watkins, and I'm the Executive Director of North Carolina Humanities. At NC Humanities, we value the connections people make with each other and with the stories, histories, and cultures of our state. And poetry is an incredibly beautiful way to do that. Poetry helps us explore and reflect on the world around us. It becomes a way for us to express ourselves and to process the good things and even the trauma in our lives. Poetry can also help us increase our empathy for other stories and experiences, which is something that I am personally very enthusiastic about. Poetry evokes ideas, memories, and feelings. We all have stories, and poetry helps us tell them and gives us a way to experience life and make connections to each other. We begin today's program. I first want to thank all of our poets. We appreciate you sharing your stories and work with us on today's program. In particular, I want to say thank you to our first reader today, who you will hear from in just a moment, Hannah Dela Cruz Abrams. Hannah is not only a thoughtful poet and writer, but is a treasured board trustee at NC Humanities. Hannah, thank you for being here. I also want to thank North Carolina Literary Review for inviting North Carolina Humanities to host this event. This is the third year in a row North Carolina Humanities has partnered with North Carolina Literary Review to celebrate National Poetry Month with an online poetry reading. I want to thank the editor, Dr. Margaret Bauer, for this continued partnership, as well as digital editor, Deborah Thomas. Margaret is also one of our treasured trustees on North Carolina Humanities Board of Trustees. Thank you, Margaret. If you are interested in getting involved with North Carolina Humanities, I invite you to visit our website at nchumanities.org. By visiting our website, you will find a way to join what we are doing at NC Humanities and register for our upcoming programs and events. If you enjoy books, I invite you to attend our North Carolina Reads statewide book club discussion events online, virtually. Our next book discussion takes place on Zoom on April 24th, and we will discuss the book American Refuge. I hope to see you there. At this time, I want to turn the program over to Deborah Thomas, who will tell us a little more about North Carolina Literary Review and lead us through today's reading. Thank you again to all the poets who are sharing their work with us today. Happy Poetry Month. Deborah, over to you.
Thanks, Sherry Paula. It's lovely to see you again. Thank you to the North Carolina Humanities for once again agreeing to host this event with us. We love doing these events for our Applewhite winners and finalists, and it's wonderful to be able to get everybody in the same room together to do this all with each other. It's a joy for us to be able to do. Of course, the North Carolina Literary Review has been preserving and promoting North Carolina's rich literary culture for over 30 years now. This year is the first year that we are a true quarterly journal. We just released our spring online issue just a week ago now, I suppose. So hopefully you've been able to see that. Many of our poems that you're going to hear today were actually featured in the spring issue, and also the winter issue, and also the fall issue. And then, of course, we've got our winners coming in our flagship print issue this summer. So some of these you will be getting to experience the first time. They haven't even been released yet. So we're super excited about that. We had over 16 people who were finalists and winners in this year's Applewhite competition. I'm pretty sure that's a record. It was an amazing amount of people who have contributed their artistry to us. So we're so excited to hear them today. Before we get to our Applewhite poets, though, we do have Hannah De La Cruz Abrams, who's going to be reading with us. As Sherry Paula said, she is a trustee for the North Carolina Humanities, and she also sits on our editorial board. Her bio is as follows. Hannah received the 2013 Whiting Writers Award for her novella, The Man Who Danced with Dolls, and her memoir in progress, The Following Sea. She has been further supported by a Rana Jaffe National Literary Award and a North Carolina Arts Council Fellowship, and her work has appeared in Orion, the Oxford American, Story Quarterly, The Pinch, Southern Humanities Review, and elsewhere. Abrams currently teaches in the Department of English at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you to Sherry Paula and to the Humanities Council and the NCLR. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other poets today. And I'm going to be reading just a brief excerpt of a collection of creation myths from the Northern Mariana Islands. And this first one is the title poem, so just creation myth. The Chamorro people say Puntan and Fu'una. Puntan, the brother, caretaker of emptiness. Fu'una, the sister, caretaker of nothing. They say the brother died and the sister plucked out his eyes and flung them high, sun and moon. She pushed his heavy breast until it arched, became the heavy sky. They say the brother's heart drummed, and they say the drumming is time. The sister Fu'una rested the brother's back on the bottom of the nothing, laid it down gently on the nothing. They say she pounded and tilled the brother's back into earth, and taro grew, and pandanus grew, and bees unfolded from the coconut trees. The sister smiled and cried, they say, swam with sharks and followed whales, and in the sea near Guahan became a rock that broke apart. They say every stone is a people. Some are not good, some fish, muddy streams, are tender, and at the end of the day, when everything is slow and the light is full of dust, they say, come near, you young children, and listen. Thank you.
That was a wonderful way to kick things off at the very beginning, right? A creation myth to start this. Thank you so much. We will get into our Applewhite writers, poets. We'll call you Applewhite poets now. Alessandra, can you join us? Alessandra Nicefer Santos, did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, great. Formerly of North Carolina, has relocated to Florida, but we're, as we say here at NCLR often, once you are a North Carolina writer, you're always a North Carolina writer. This is her first finalist poem for the Applewhite contest. Surely you're not not your first time entering those. So congratulations. We're very excited about this. If you will tell us the title of your poem and then go ahead and read.
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, I'm Alessandra Nice-Other Santos. Yes, this is my first time with a finalist poem. I've gotten 2 semi-finalists before this one. That was really exciting. So every year, a thrill. My poem is How Like You See Me. And it's after Lauren Zuniga's poem, Submissive. I am the prayer mat, and you, the devoted. Whispering divinity so soft it flutters into kisses all over, through me. A breeze rippling all my pages. You understand electricity. My body can see it glowing, feel it, me, slow and open, surrender to the joy of proper use. You, a conductor, harmonizing to the deep humming within. Moonbeams on eyelashes, kiss, hold me bone to bone, bite, lick my insides clean, whole, press me till I see God's me, how like you see me. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. One of my favorite parts of doing the reading is being able to hear the author's voice and intonation of these words that I've read on the page that are beautiful in and of themselves, but the reading just gives them this, there's this extra layer to it, right? That is just so incredible. So thank you for that. Thank you all for sharing your words with us today. Bill, can you join us now? Bill Griffin is from Elkin, North Carolina. This is his second time as a finalist, and he's also had other poems published with us in 2003 in that issue. The interesting thing, one of the interesting, I mean, the poem is interesting, of course, but also the photos that accompany your poem, you took, right? So that's
Right.
really cool. That's a different thing. So if you will tell us the title of your poem and go ahead and read.
The title is Spent. Coreopsis, spent, limp rays curling, curdled disc, and one lone fly, like aster's dry winged seed, perched on delusion that the head still holds some promise. I turn away from everything sere and brown. Where else would I turn this sullen afternoon? Until she calls me to join her, leaf-strewn trail beside grassy creek, where it sings to itself, oblivious, 2 soft pairs of footfalls among fern and shadow. Partridge berry makes its own warm light, and ground cedar runs rings around us. I crouch before a cranefly orchid, determined buds dainty as dew claws, still unopened mid-July, and absent basil winter leaves pocked olive, but upturn them for satin underleaf maroon. Yet while she reminds me about co-evolution, blossoms that couple with their pollinators, I can't stop seeing that useless fly, bulging maroon ommatidia, wings blush iridescence, proboscis needle dripping one sour jewel spent, until, for just this moment, the world opens itself around us, and I open to its secrets, kingfisher rattle from another planet, beaconed dank of moss and fungus, every vireo are familiar, swelling benediction breeze that gossips among beech and laurel and promises always, always something new.
I love that. I love that we could almost run that as a flashback to our environmental writing issue, right? It's so incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. Los, can you join us, please? Los Pequeño Glacier. This hails from Western North Carolina, and this is his first time as a finalist in the Applewhite. And is it this issue that you have a book review in? I can't remember if it was this issue or if it was the winter issue. We have a review of his most recent book of poetry. If you will tell us the title of your poem and read, please.
Okay. The title is the same as the first line. You might catch that. This is the first question I ask. This is the first question I ask when I run into Diego Rivera at his mural in the Hotel de Prado. It's completely obvious, he grunts with a brassy accent, a wave of his brush spattering the air with alizarin crimson. Pigment plunges stirringly into ectoplasmic blue undertones. I'm drawn into his mural's world. Sueño de una tarde dominical en la Alameda Central. Its muted hues spark vivid connections between dream of a Sunday afternoon and my family history. In it, Frida Kahlo acerbically holds a black and white yin-yang symbol. Beside her is child self Diego in breeches and striped knee socks, pockets stuffed with boyish objects, string, a lizard. Next to Diego is Nuestra Catrina, wearing an Aztec serpent boa. People dream, Diego ruminates. They walk. History is there. Do you want to know who you were before your parents were born? To the left, behind a bench where 3 campesinos are totally zonked, Diego has meticulously layered in a snapshot portrait of my progenitors. I see the round nimbus of a baby's head, me. A lunula of mother's face is there, radiantly gazing at her child. Behind her, even less of my father can be seen. He is a soldier, one of the American troops occupying Mexico's ancient capital. My father's heartbeat has crossed cultural borders. Ah, so you see them, Diego speaks, abruptly breaking my concentration. I savor his dream world rendering, trees dancing like sylvan wisps. I look devotedly at my parents. I am swaddled in my mother's arms. My father unwavering in his attention. Thank you.
Oh, that was lovely. I have so many questions. However, we are hopefully going to have time for Q&As at the end. So if you have questions as well, just hold those and we will get to those at the end. Thank you so much. Robert, will you join us, please? Robert Hill is from Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't want to say North Carolina. Charlotte. 5th time joining us as an Applewhite finalist. Robert, will you tell us the title of your poem and read?
Thank you for having this festival. This is wonderful. My poem is entitled After Midnight. I'm struck by the readings already, that so often poems really deal with a very stark reality in the language. Again and again, the starkness of words just jumps out at me. But in the same time, there's also such a quality of dream and imagination. And that's basically what my poem's about. I feel like it's redundant almost. I have an epigraph. It accidentally turns out that it's the Latin motto for the state of South Carolina, where I now live. I love the North Carolina motto, Esse quam videre, which I memorized as a child. I got to South Carolina, didn't know this, but I love this phrase, dum spiro spero. You know, when I breathe, I hope. When there is breath, there is hope. So the poem is called After Midnight, and it's a combination mostly of my memories and dreams, and it's a weird time. And at the end, I feel fortunate enough that I have a loved one who holds me close despite these meanderings. Okay, the poem is After Midnight. There are 17 cattle in the pine cones. At first, as I was settling to sleep, I started to say, as a startlement to my sleeping wife, that the dog is walking on the pond. But it wasn't sleepy, edgy enough to be real, to be really what I wanted to say. I didn't want to alarm her by saying, well, that, but to think cattle and say it into the dark chiseled runes behind my eyeballs, behind my eyelids, which were burning. I was sure I'd conjured famine dreams from cheap book illustrations of Phaeric courts, astonished by Joseph's visionary schemes. Not wise enough to slake my children's thirst, balm my dog's aging organs and frames, cut free my nation's wrangled corpus, yet lurking like a burrowed beetle in spines of cones, knocked by wind and other passings, I tried a night to say myself to sleep, while cattle surprised the jogging neighbors. Sunflowers worked toward August, stone fruit, bleached wing bones of hope, tender exhaustions of our powers, two who love each other, talking into sleep mist about foolishness. I hear 7 + 10 prophetic animals treading our tree fall. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, thank you. And we all need everybody's art. I mean, you can only you can say what you can say. So thank you. Kimberly, speaking of South Carolina, can you join us, please? Kimberly lives on the border, as a lot of our South Carolina writers do. We'll claim you. This is her second time as a finalist in the Applewhite competition. Can you tell us the title of your poem and then read it?
Yeah, this is called There Is No Time, with nods to Lou Reed and Wilfred Owen. Should I go ahead? Great. Hard to hear the church bells, the constant parade of funerals. This is no time for shaking hands, no time for us to disengage. There is no time. Only the monstrous anger of the nurses, drawing down the blinds with patients drowning from COVID-corrupted lungs. Each day, another 1,000. A shortage of hearses. There is no time. No consolations, please. The janitor is teaching math to 4th grade. If you could hear the cacophony of children wheezing, parents brought to tears. The white-collar banker spent a spring indoors. The news is droning on, but no one wants to hear it anymore. No one wants to be here without you. No time to think of the voices we'll never hear again, while maskless politicians salute their flags, clutching Miami, Boise, New York in a black garbage bag.
Thank you. It's still incredible to me how inspired people got. And I guess that's probably true of any tragedy. So it's heart-rending for the art coming out of tragedy, for sure. Joyce, can you join us now, please? Joyce will be reading 2 poems, both selected as Applewhite finalists. She lives in Iredell County. This is her first time as a finalist, but had a poem published with us in 2010. Joyce, if you will go ahead and tell us the title of your first poem and go ahead and read and then go right into this.
I'm sorry to say that I misunderstood and thought that I would be reading only the poem that was in this issue. And so that's the,
Okay, that's fine. If that's the one that you have prepared, you go right ahead. It is absolutely
well, I'm disappointed. Every poet likes to show off. But
maybe we can circle back to you. That's fine. Yeah, but go
yes,
ahead with what
yes.
you got prepared.
I'll read from my poem that I'm going to read. It's called Chinaberry Tree, and it too has an epigraph. Here in this retreat were rest and cool and shelter. The Chinaberry tree became a temple. That's from Jesse Redmond Fawcett. It's fallen from favor here, from the days when landscapers extolled its easy growth, leaves, shade, delicate flowers for family lawns. Now, experts say it's best removed, like expunging names from country club lists. Some fearful tribes proclaimed it the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Its alluring purple flowers, bitter bark, tender leaves, and yellow berries, killing and uprooting the source seemed best. It's always carried stories rooted deeply in lore. Rumors lived embedded in its branches, its bark, its fronds. Michaud planted China berries by Charleston paths, lush, leafy, not too tall, shading walkers from the heat. The pride of India was at home in southern soil. Our home sat in the midst of Chinaberry trees, thick and lush, hovering in front and backyard. We named them umbrella trees for their soft rounded tops, their arms and leaves. I hid in a Chinaberry bower, climbed a Chinaberry limb, swung from a Chinaberry tree. Once, my mother walked me into the shade, carefully parted the deep green fronds like arched bouquets, warned me not to touch the soft blue thing nesting there. Don't ever disturb them. The mother might leave, she warned. Just know they're there. Once upon a time, birds flew drunk, swaggering, swaying. They swung and swooped, tipsy on Chinaberry wine, sailing on bird joy highs, fluffing drunken feathers on a spring day of nesting, feasting on green and gold. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. Morrow, will you join us? Morrow Dowdle hails from Hillsborough, North Carolina. This is their second Applewhite finalist chosen poem. And their poem is in our feature section, as I believe will become apparent as they introduce their poem. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So my poem is called The Trick to Losing Your Vision, and it has to do with going blind during a childhood illness and then regaining some, but not all of that sight and the implications that it's had. The trick to losing your vision. So you want the rationale behind the magic, the big reveal. First, place a drop of distortion in one eye, like a warp in old glass. Colors fade, known only when you look at a tree. Remember the hue of spring leaves, bright and unshakable. Image births an orphanage of identical twins. Then the last stage, awaken to shadow, vestige of what has been pulled like scarves from a fist. Now, wait for it to come back. Hold up your bewitched match. Abracadabra, it strikes, just enough light to unveil what lives around it. The audience applauds. You take the bow. You want to conjure more, but lose your knack. Business goes bust. 25 years and still no one can see what you can't see. Invisibility and alchemy you didn't mean to mix. A tunnel from which you cannot emerge. Every surface punctured with black, a night sky in negative. Your children love you when you fall over them, but other mothers do not feel the same. The cane you use in crowds will not sprout optics on its stalk. No spell book tells you when you can't see straight, you can't think straight either. Your mind fractures as it searches for something it will never find again. White rabbits scattered, doves flown out of grasp. You peer deep into that black hat. Feel the cold breath of its void.
Thank you. Morrow's poem is in the spring issue out now, I believe. And also one of our semi-finalists, Glennis Redmond, also has a poem in the feature section in the spring out now. So it's always lovely when we get creative writing in the feature sections for this. Our next two readers unfortunately had family events come up that they were not going to be able to make it today, but I do want to acknowledge both Nathan Sneed and SL Cockrell. They were finalists for the first time this year. So if you have not yet read their work, those are both in the spring issue as well. They're fantastic poems. And then unable to attend today were Richard Betts, Janet Ford, and Cheryl Skinner. So this program would have been even longer had everybody been here. But we're going to skip to Melanie at this point. Melanie, will you join us? Melanie Tafajan is from Raleigh, and this is her first time being a finalist with the Applewhite contest. Will you read us the title and then read us your poem?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's been lovely hearing everyone's poems. This poem is called Blue Light. We can adjust the light on all the screens. Softer for eyes, easier for sleep. Like me, hellebores thrive in shade. Still in the dark, their purple faces tilt upward toward the light. Oyster shells feed the soil. You'll find them ground down on the coast, ground down in gardens, iridescent pearls tossed in with the dirt. In California, my grandfather dove for abalones. He lifted the grilled white meat to my mother's small mouth. Every year, the abalone diminish. Now we use the shells for soap dishes. As a child, when I couldn't sleep, my mother read me Goodnight Moon. Years later, I learned the way the woman who wrote the book died. She kicked her leg skyward post-surgery, said, "Look how good I'm doing," and a blood clot slipped straight to her heart. Everything that makes the world beautiful is turning blue around us. Every time I scrub my hands, the rainbow shell foams with white suds. When I can't sleep, I scroll small pictures of our world. The light glows up my little room. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I said finalist. You were an honorable mention. So we're getting into our winners here. It was a little bit easier in my notes, just write finalists for everybody. Deborah, will you join us, please? Deborah Kaufman hails from just outside Chapel Hill, from Mebane, for those who know. She was actually our winner, our Applewhite winner in 2015. Congratulations. And has been either a semi-finalist or a finalist 4 times now. And she's a Black Sock, as is our winner. So congratulations. So if you will tell us the title of your poem and then read.
Yes, thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you, Humanities Council and NCLR and all of you for being here today. The title is Daguerreologue, and that is defined as an imaginary conversation with an old photo of yourself. So the speaker is speaking to the photograph. When Mother made you pose in your Annie Oakley outfit, her anxiety, does it fit right? Do you like it? Is caught in your half smile, clasped hands. What held you back from your desire to please her, but also to be free to outshoot any man at full gallop? When the camera clicked, did you sense the difference between the actual you and the one you imagined? Each passing year, a fine silt drifted over you, over us, others' expectations, or their lack of imagination. Be a teacher, nurse, or secretary, marry and raise children. So many small ways to give yourself away. I resisted sometimes, but in such a quiet, stubborn way, perhaps you did not notice. Did I disappoint you? Maybe that innate core of you, of us, never had enough wildness, the fierce loneliness it takes to be that woman riding westward across the prairie, waving her hat, never growing old. Thank you.
Let's not cry. Let's not cry. Let's not cry. Thank you. That was great. Michael, will you join us, please? Michael White is hails from Wilmington, teaches at UNC Wilmington down there. I'm assuming a colleague of our dear Hannah, who read for us at the top. This is his first time as a finalist, but not his first time in our pages. He's had poetry published in 2004 and 2009. And actually, you won't read his poem, his second place poem in NCLR. Congratulations. His poem was actually picked up and run, will be running in the Atlantic, has already been published in the Atlantic, but is joining us here to read it for us today. Thank you so much. Michael, will you tell us the title of your poem and go ahead and read?
Thank you all. This has really been lovely, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. The title of this poem is I Wish I Could Remember What You Said That Cracked Us Up Until We Sank Back on the Bed Inside. The truth is, we were never more in love than we were then, when all the chemo, radiation, everything was over. We held hands. Sometimes I'd lean across to readjust your cannula to help you breathe. Sometimes I'd dream that we were drifting down a river, neither of us noticing that the river we were drifting down had grown too wide to see the shore on either side. It's just a dream, I tell myself. But dreams are how we travel through the dark, and why I heard the hiss of oxygen, the plash of waves against our bow, when my mind turned to you this morning, trying to remember, decade after decade, what you said.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that we got to experience that. Janice, will you join us, please? Jan is our Applewhite winner for 2023. It's her fourth time as a finalist. You were runner-up last year. Am I remembering that? Or had poems published last year as well for us. And so, go ahead.
Oh, I did. I was not a runner-up last year, a finalist.
Okay, great. So it's lovely to have you. It's great for times, and it's great to have people back. This is great. Can you tell us the title of your winning poem and then read it for us, please?
Sure. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you to everybody at NC Humanities and the Literary Review. And I've enjoyed everybody's poems today. My poem is titled, That Lake, That July Sun. You left it here for me to discover, emptying your house, a black and white snapshot, your careless scrawl, Lake Erie, July 60. Always shadowy as a fish underwater, an early memory surfaces, caught in a net of date and place. That stony beach, that cabin. Perched on the pier, you pose like a model, strapless swimsuit, legs scissor crossed. I lean against you, bangs cut too short, young enough to need naps. Chest bare, he slouches beside us. Was it that day his hand sealed my mouth? After, I peered through that screen door, afraid to go out, afraid to stay inside alone, waiting for you to notice it was time to come and wake me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate that. That is the end of our poetry reading. We now have a few minutes left to do a Q&A for either our readers or for anyone who is watching. If you want to throw a question in the chat box for any of our readers. We have been conducting the James Applewhite Poetry Competition since 2011. Of course, it's now the written poetry competition because we also have our latest competition to join the ranks, the Jackie Shelton Green Performance Poetry Prize. This is year 2 for that. Both of these are still open. The submission window is still open through April 30th. So hopefully we'll see all of your names. If you haven't already submitted for this year, you'll send us some original unpublished work so that we can enjoy some more things from you. Jan, if you'll pop back on for a second while we're waiting, unless somebody, I don't see anybody else throwing their video on with a question, but feel free to do that. If you can tell us a little bit about about what was different this year, maybe with this poem, since you have been a finalist in the past. Do you have any idea like what it was about this poem in particular that the judge or the readers were like, yes, this one?
I wish I did, then I could replicate that. I don't really, I think so much depends on chance. And I really don't know exactly why this one stood out, but I'm glad that it did.
Was it something that you had written recently, or was it something that you had been kind of tinkering with for a while?
You know, I started it during the pandemic or even before, and it was very long. I wanted to write a long, skinny poem since I almost never do that. But so it went through many revisions, and then I realized that the sonnet was probably the best form for it because it gave it a container and forced me to eliminate all the detail that wasn't necessary or wasn't serving the poem.
Morrow reminded us in the chat, the judge Meg Day complimenting the poem's form as well as the expert handling of tender material. Yeah, that's great. Deborah, can you join us back for just a second?
Yes.
I'm curious because you also write plays, which I happen to know. I'm curious how much of your playwriting brain and your poetry brain, is it all just words on a page, or are those two things very separate? Because your poem very much feels like a character and like something that you could craft into. And I don't know that that's necessarily true of all of the poetry that you've written. So I'm curious how much of an overlap is there?
That's a good question. One of my friends says that my poems are like little plays, but I do see a difference, and that is in how I want the form. Just, is it a dialogue? Is there a plot to it? I don't write really long poems. And so, but I've written a lot of really short plays, like 10-minute plays. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think I started writing plays because I was writing in voice. I guess that's what I would say that maybe they have in common, is just a sense of voice, and voice brings a character to life. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Deborah, can I ask a question on top of that too? I'm curious.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could just open that question up to some of our other poets today and maybe talk a little bit about your process, which I know is a big question to ask, but as a non-poet, I mean, how do you even begin to make such beautiful works of art? And I encourage anyone to unmute and share their thoughts on that.
I can say that my process is not one I would advise anybody to follow because I have to stall and then finally sit down and write many drafts. It's hard for me to write you're always advised to write a really messy first draft, but I'm always wanting to get it into a poem, So that's something that I work against, to let it be as messy as it wants to until something emerges.
I'm fascinated with the different processes that were here with these many different poets. Thank you all for doing this. When you ask about process, I was forced, of course, to think about my own. Very often, mine begins with, I guess, with what I would call trying to be alert to a moment of inspiration. And I don't mean by that a bolt from the blue. I mean, like, I'll hear a phrase, or I will see a line on a sign, or I will think of a word that seems particularly. Do you remember when, as a kid, you'd ride around and think that word looks funny? You know, just the word looks funny. And every now and then you have to feel as a poet that words look funny or they look incredibly beautiful. And I think being alert, I sort of hate to use this term mindful, it's being used so much, but you have to sort of be mindful of possibility because you don't know when that might come. That's one kind of process for me. And the other kind is when you've had a terribly deep experience, happy, sad, whatever, frightening, political, not political, a deep experience where you struggle to try to find a way to say it that won't sound the way everybody else in the world would have said it. You have to sort of find a way that feels new. And that kind of thing reminds me of what Ezra Pound said about poetry is news that stays news. And that idea about it being new, even after you've known it, is part of the miracle of language and experience that poets bring, I think. I guess I should say almost every poet I know has many different processes. I mean, it just depends, but we could speak of some of the processes, I suppose.
Right.
Others
Yeah.
chip in. I talk too much. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm gonna let Joyce go because she's been nodding her head, and then Deborah, you can jump on in.
I was just going to, I wasn't going to offer any wisdom, but I'll run my mouth anyway and say that somehow for me, and it's probably, you notice I'm old. I read the modernists, the ones who started out with the image and just something you see or hear, one thing, that mockingbird that goes on and on, or my mother's kitchen spatula that's hanging on the cabinet door. Something I usually have to have a trigger, and that trigger often cooks in my brain for weeks or even months. And the poems that I submitted for this, I'm sure that I started on them a couple of years ago, and they have to simmer, and then I have to look at them and see how bad they are, and then make the changes to improvement. So I'm so old, I'll probably never finish all the poems that I'm letting simmer, but at least it gives me something to look forward to.
That's right. It gives you something to continue to
That's
work on.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Deborah, you had something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I people who know me probably get sick of hearing me say this because I love it so much and I say it a lot. First of all, I wanted to say, Robert and Joyce, I really resonate with what both of you said. But the quote is from Robert Frost, because this, more than anything to me, resounds or resonates or whatever. He wrote, I write to find out what it is I didn't know I knew. And I think that's part of it, right? The discovery. Yeah. And we don't know until we're writing it. Yeah, that's all I
Oh
wanted.
gosh.
Words
Oh, gosh.
from Frost.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Bill,
Yeah.
you had something you wanted to share?
Well, I wanted to pay homage to Kathy Smith Bowers, whom I don't fully have the ability to emulate, but her book, The Abiding Image, is about the poetic process. And besides enlightening, it's super entertaining. It's just like a laugh every other page. So this particular poem that I submitted did start with that image of the macro photograph of the fly on the dried up flower with a little drop of something sticking off of its nose, and the idea of, everything fades, but everything holds on to the hope that they're still going to get something sweet out of it. And it also had to kind of roll around for a long time until the image made some sense in it as a poem. But if you've not read Kathy Smith Bowers' book, it's worth keeping in your library.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, we are at 4:59, folks, and I promised we would wrap up by 5. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, for submitting, for sharing your artwork with not only us here today, but with everybody in the North Carolina Literary Review and everybody with the North Carolina Humanities. We love celebrating National Poetry Month in April with the North Carolina Humanities, and we will look forward to doing this again next year. Go find a local poetry reading in your community. I'm sure there is one. Support your local poets. Everyone, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Bye.
Thank you.